Hello, Battle Ready. You'll notice that we have a new guest here to talk about the Bible tonight. My mom is taking care of my dad, who's feeling under the weather tonight, so this may be a shorter Battle Ready lesson. We'll see how it goes, but I have confidence that Adam and I can talk to you about this evening. We're in Exodus chapter 22. Give everybody a chance to turn there. And I just wanted to talk to you, Adam, about getting more than you pay for. Okay, so a lot of times when you order something online, or you order something, or you get something at the store and it looks really great in the store, and then you get it home and there's utter disappointment because in 5 seconds it breaks. Has this happened to you? You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you get home and like you spent your hard-earned money, you traded it for something that wasn't of value. And when we get ready to do this lesson, the first thing we need to talk about and review is the fact that we are right in the middle of the law in Exodus 22. We're talking about the law given by God on Mount Sinai to Moses for his people. And here's what you'll hear a lot of people say. Just talk to me about this and relax. I know you're nervous, but don't be. So a lot of people will say, they'll take a story from the New Testament, like the woman caught in the very act of adultery that they bring before Jesus. They throw her down at his feet. They say, the law says we should stone her. What do you say? A lot of people will look at what the people in that story are doing and they'll say, that's religion for you, right? You've heard people say that. Mm-hmm. That's what religious people will do. And they'll talk about how the law that they were under is, you'll hear people, I'd be scared to death to say it, is stupid or wrong or bad. And when they say that, it shows a lack of understanding for what the Bible actually says the law is, because the law was given by God. When that woman was brought there after committing adultery and the death penalty is in question in that case, that is the penalty for what she'd done. Now, they didn't do it correctly because the man should have been there with her, but that is the penalty. That's the penalty from God. Why do you think, and you just tell me whatever comes to your mind, but why do you think the penalties are so harsh? You know, people say that's religion and all that other stuff. Why do you think stone her is the answer to that? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's just think about when God gives rules for a living, did he give them just to be hateful and mean and arbitrary, or does he have a purpose in what he's doing? What's your thought on that?
There was a lot more death penalty back then than there is now.
Absolutely.
Especially from God, because he's not as involved as he was. Well, he's still involved, I mean, but he's not like, doing miracles or, well, he is, but not as much as he was back then. He wasn't on earth like Jesus was then.
Right.
So, I'm not sure why, but maybe that has something to do with it.
That there's a lot more death penalty offenses. So as they're walking through the desert for 40 years, and they're walking into Canaan to build a new kingdom and all this stuff, God has told them, here's the list of things that if you do this, you die. Mm-hmm. Each one of those things is something that if God allows that to go unchecked, will completely destroy his people. But there's a bigger reason even than that. And that's the fact that they're dealing with God the Father. God the Son and the Holy Spirit are all one, but they're dealing with God the Father without the sacrifice of Christ yet, right? Mm-hmm. And God is perfect and holy. He is untouchable by a human being without the sacrifice of Christ, right? Mm-hmm. So when these sins that he lines out in 22, they have a severe penalty because God and sin can have no fellowship. And that makes it sound like God is really angry and really mean, and people misinterpret that. God's holiness is not anger or meanness. God's holiness is perfection and righteousness. But we're only allowed to come into that relationship with God through what his son did on the cross, and because of that great love that marries up with that justice. So when we read the law, it can be very easy to get depressed. It can be very easy to think, there's no way I can make it to heaven. There's no way I can please God, but you can through Jesus Christ. We have to look at this law in Exodus 22 and say that Jesus fulfilled it. He's the perfect answer to it. So as we read this, we're going to talk about how Jesus is the answer to what this is. Does that make sense? So Exodus chapter 22, verse 1 says, if a man steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Okay, so he's already said before in chapter 19 and 20, he already said, don't steal. But now we're getting specific. If you did steal, if you took my animal and you went to either eat it or sell it, how much do you have to pay back?
5 times.
5 times. So it's not just one. You don't just give back what you took. You have to give back better. 5 times over. What happens if you don't?
You die.
Well, there's no death penalty on this one, but that was a good guess. There's no death penalty on this one, but it does say you can be sold until you pay your debt.
Yeah.
They'll take your liberty until you do this. So verse 2 says, if a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall be no blood shed for him. I got to read 3 with it before we can talk about it. If the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him, for he shall make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. Okay, so here's God in his wisdom and his perfection and his balance. He said, if somebody breaks into your house in the middle of the night, put yourself there, Morgan Center Road, if somebody breaks into our house, you have the right to come downstairs in the middle of the night. That person breaking into your house, he's a danger to your family, to your life. You have the right to kill him. But what if I wait till morning, I can see him, he's in my house, he's stealing, but he sees me and starts to run away. Can I kill him then?
No.
No. There's a difference in our law too. Our law is based on this system. So you were allowed to protect yourself, right, in the middle of the night, but you're not allowed to, through vengeance, to go and hurt someone. You've got to, your things are not worth more than his life. And God made a difference in those things. Do you see how wise God's law is, right? You can protect your life. Your life is valuable. But if it's just your stuff in the morning and you don't need to kill that person, that his life is more valuable than your stuff. You don't do that. He will have to pay back what he took. Verse 4 says, if the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be an ox or an ass or a sheep, he shall restore double. Now, we just said he had to restore 5 times. So then down here it talks about restoring double. Well, it's 5 times if I out steal what you need to eat and sell it, and that's my plan. It's another thing if I am taking your tools to make food and trade. There's different penalties based on different offenses under the law, just like in the American justice system, right? There's a difference between the different violations. There's grand theft, and then there's theft. We don't want to do all stealing's wrong, right? But there are different penalties based on what you do. It goes on to talk about if somebody puts their animal into your field and lets them eat all of what you've planted. Well, what do they have to do then? It says he shall make restitution. If he's burning a fire and he accidentally catches your field on fire, he has to make up for it. But I don't care about the rules as much as I care about making sure people see that Jesus is the fulfillment of this. So when you violated someone else's rights, when you hurt someone else, you didn't just pay back what you owed. You had to give more, right? There was a punishment in that you had to give more. So there's this idea that you are returning better than you had. So let's just imagine that someone stole from you, okay? Someone took something very important to you. How do you think the idea that they have to not just pay you back, but pay you back more is beneficial to your relationship? How would you feel about that person if they had to pay you back more?
Well, say
Talk in your microphone.
say I had something someone took from me, just like you said, and so if they just gave it right back, what would
Because
that?
they got caught.
Then why would they steal? Why would they steal anymore? Or why wouldn't they steal anymore?
Because there's no punishment.
They would just go out and do it again and say, well, if he catches me, I'll just have to give it right back.
Right.
It
So
doesn't make any sense.
the fact that there's a penalty to be paid says you don't want to steal because you get caught stealing, you're going to have to pay 5 times more.
Right.
Right. You're going to be punished for that act. It's not just a this for that equal pay. And the reason I want to talk about that is because that's what Jesus did. So all of human beings, the Bible says, in Adam, all sinned. All of us fell into sin. And we could not be rectified. We could not be back in the presence of God because we were full of sin. Jesus didn't come and just pay back your sin and my sin. He gave better, right? He went beyond the penalty of the law and he made it even better. So not only did he save you and pay back what you owed, he paid so much more than that, that you get to be a child of God, that you get to come into his holiness and his righteousness and be in a right relationship with God because he did so much better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about Jesus being the fulfillment of this, he goes beyond the penalty. He pays way more than we owe, and he gives us even better for our return. He became sin. He took on that sin himself and then paid way more than we owed. Right? So a lot of people argue about this in theological circles, but do you think Jesus died for just those that believe in him? Or did Jesus pay the penalty for everyone?
He paid it for everyone.
Yeah, way more than, right? Above and beyond what we owed, he paid.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think, why was he able to pay more than we owe? Because he was perfect. He was holy. He was righteous. He's the fulfillment of the law. So I want to go down to, it talks about trespassing. It talks about if you accidentally hurt the property of your neighbor, that you have to pay it back. So there's sins that we do outright and on purpose, and we do knowing that we're doing wrong. And then there's sin that we do that is you don't know you're doing wrong. Have you ever been found out that you did something wrong, and when you did it, you didn't even realize that was a wrong thing?
Mm-hmm.
So you're in violation. You didn't even know the Bible talked about that.
Yeah.
That's happened. So he not only paid for what we did on purpose, he paid for what we did on accident. He paid for all of it. It talks about that this has never been said before, but it talks about with a man and a woman how if he breaks his promise to her, if he uses and abuses her, one way that you'll know a culture and you'll know a civilization is in decline away from God, look at how they treat their women. Look at America today and see how we treat women. We talk about the empowerment of women and the equality of women, but women aren't protected. They are violated. We sell women in this country and children in this country. And if you want to know how far we are from God, look at how we treat them. In verse 16 says, if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Whosoever lieth with the beast shall be put to death. He that sacrifices to any god, save unto the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. He said, you treat this woman that you have done wrong, you have to restore unto her the respect and the treatment and the value that you would unto a virgin, any woman. She has to be protected and honored, but there's 2 more death penalty cases there too. Witchcraft, it says, and violations with animals, but it talks about witchcraft. Why do you think God would say, don't let a witch live?
Because
Why is that a death penalty case?
because I think it's just because it's the opposite of what Christians do. They try to get people to go to heaven, and witches try to get people to go to hell.
So first, we probably better define our terms. When we're talking about biblical witchcraft, we're not talking about the Wizard of Oz, and we're not talking about Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about somebody who is using demonic power
to get around things in life.
To get around things in life and to worship like as false gods. And he's saying you don't even tolerate that at all. That's a death penalty offense. To be my people and to be fooling around with these demons and this darkness. You're not supposed to be there. And God said that's not something that you allow in or around my people that's under the law. How does God fulfill this law, this death penalty? Well, and this is going to be a stretch, and people are going to, I can already tell that people are going to react to this when I say this out loud. But if you have lived a life of sin and selfishness and you live for yourself in the world, you're guilty of witchcraft. The Bible says rebellion is the same as witchcraft. If you've rebelled against God in your life, you're guilty. Guess what you're guilty of? Death. You're guilty of the death penalty, aren't you? Mm-hmm. And he's saying right here that this violation, this seeing an opportunity to follow Satan to get what you want as opposed to listening to what God has to say, this is a death penalty offense.
And that's why I don't get why people, they'll say, I've done too much, I can't go to heaven. But I was born into witchcraft. Like I've already done it.
Well, you were
I was
born a
I
sinner
was born
in
doing
rebellion.
witchcraft. Yeah.
Good point, because rebellion is the same as witchcraft. We were born
We were
rebels.
born in it. Yeah.
We were born rebels.
Everybody when they're born deserves to go to hell. That's just the facts.
That child is innocent. That child is not accountable for his actions when he's born.
Right.
But he's born under the curse of sin. We're
born under the curse. Yeah.
And you're going to get to be a certain age, and you're going to say, "I'm going to do what I want, and I'm going to get it the way I want," and I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
And God knows you're going to do that. Even if you're one of these nice people, He knows what you think in your heart and in your head. He knows what we're guilty of. We are guilty of death, but Christ took that death penalty for us. As bad as it is, these sins that we're talking about in here, murder and theft and rape and all these things that are under the law, that are covered under the law, God took the penalty, and we can get out from under that burden and that punishment of sin, that stain of sin, because of what Jesus did on the cross, His fulfillment. It says, verse 22, "You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If thou afflict them in any wise, and they cry unto me, I shall surely hear their cry. My wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will be widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as a usurer, neither shall thou lay upon him usury." He says, when a person is in need, when my people are in need and they need to borrow money from you, you don't see that as a business opportunity. Right? I remember talking to somebody one time who told me that when they first got married, they went out and they used a credit card to buy a washing machine. And they said they paid for that washing machine for over 20 years at the minimum payment. When they calculated what they paid for that washing machine, it was like you could have bought 10 of them, 11 of them, for what that they had to spend in interest. That's what it's talking about with usury. It's interest. He said, you're not supposed to loan things out thinking, boy, I'm really going to make a killing off this person when they have to pay me back. You're supposed to loan to someone who's poor without expecting return. You're supposed to see them in their need and help them out. That's completely different than what we do, right? Mm-hmm. We live in a debt crazy culture. I mean, they market credit cards now to children, right? To little children. Put your chore money on this credit card for your kid. We want people to get in the habit of borrowing and being in debt. And the Bible says the borrower is slave to the lender. And God, from the beginning, bringing them out of Egypt, said, I don't want my people to be slaves, right? I want them to be free. I want them. And He realized that if we got in a place where we were taking advantage of people in bad situations, that we don't not only be hurting them, but be hurting us. Now, here's the tricky part. How do we see that fulfilled in Jesus Christ? Do you remember when John the Baptist is arrested? Remember that story? Herod arrests him because he said something against his wife and their illegitimate relationship. And John is in prison. He's waiting to see what's going to happen. And he sends disciples out to Jesus, says, are you the one we look for, or we look for another? Do you remember that story?
I think so.
And Jesus answers back, go tell John that the poor are having the gospel preached to them. He talks about the blind receiving their sight and people being healed. He said, tell him the poor have been receiving the gospel. In other words, they owe a great debt they can never repay, but Jesus Christ has arrived and He's preaching the gospel to these people. The good news that it doesn't, the Isaiah says, come and buy. Why do you spend money on that which is not bread? Come and buy without price. In other words, you don't need money to get what I offer. Right? Jesus said, I've come to give you something that you could never pay for. Don't worry about being poor and owing me. I freely give to you salvation. I freely give you this gift. So Jesus fulfills this. He says, don't take advantage of people that are in desperate situations, but give to them without expecting return. He said, if he gives you his cloak as a down payment because he needs money to eat, when nighttime comes and it gets cold, go take him his coat back, because that's his blanket, right? You should, again, the principle is life is more valuable than stuff. Life is more valuable than money. And the reason your life is more valuable is not because of how valuable you are, but because that life came from God. He breathed it into us and made us in His image. And Jesus is the fulfillment of that verse. He wants His people to obey these laws so that eventually when Jesus shows up on the scene and he's the answer for every question that they have, every violation they've committed, that they'll recognize who he is. I want to turn from Exodus 22 to Hebrews chapter 12. And I want you to see that the author of Hebrews has to say something about Jesus being the fulfillment of the law. If you go to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18, and I'll wait till you get there.
No, go ahead.
But he's talking about how that when they received the law of God, when they came to Mount Sinai, his presence was on top of that mountain. And God had to tell the people to stand way back. Don't even let your animals touch the mountain, because when they touch it, they're going to die. Right? They're going to be killed if they touch this holy mountain and they're unclean. So Moses, you come up, but tell them to stand back. And it refers to that in verse 18. It says, "For you are not come unto the mount that might be touched, and that burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the words should not be spoken to them anymore." When they heard God's voice on Sinai, they said, "Please, Moses, just go find out what God has to say, but we can't bear the holiness, the wrath, the power of God. We need it to be moved back away from us." Verse 20 says, "For they could not endure that which was commanded. And if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it shall be stoned or thrust through with a dart." And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, "I exceedingly fear and quake." Moses, who dared to walk toward that mountain and talk to God, shook from head to toe in the presence of a holy and righteous and perfect God. And to Jesus, verse 24. Wait, I skipped the most important part. Verse 23, "To the general assembly and the church of the firstborn," that's who we came to, "which are written in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirit of just men made perfect." I skipped verse 22. Let's go back up to verse 22. "But you are come not to Sinai, but to Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, and the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels, and to the general assembly of the church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaketh better things than that of Abel." Hebrews starts with God has spoke to people in lots of different ways and lots of different prophets and the times that he chose. But he's chosen now to speak to us through Jesus. So all this law that we're reading in Exodus, Jesus has something better to say. And why do you think it mentions Abel? What's the story about Abel? What happened to Abel?
Well, Abel got killed by his brother. It was the
Why?
first murder because he was covetous of his relationship with God.
And God comes down. Cain kills Abel because God accepted Abel's sacrifice. He didn't accept Cain's sacrifice. And he says, "Cain, where's your brother?" And Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And then God says, what's he say?
I can't remember.
He says, "I hear his blood."
Yeah.
Crying to me from the ground. Okay? So this verse says that Jesus, who's the mediator, he's the go-between between us and God of this new covenant, with his own blood, right, speaks better things than that of Abel. So let's think about what was Abel's blood saying to God?
I don't really understand why God said that because he would already know that Abel's dead because he knows everything.
He knows Abel's dead.
So why would he tell Cain like that?
Exactly.
I don't understand.
Okay, so he says, I hear your brother's blood. It's a way of saying his blood tells me you're guilty of death.
Why would he choose to say it like that, though?
Well, because I think he says it like that. Now, you tell me if you disagree, but I think he says it like that because Cain thinks he's hid it so well. Cain thinks it's hidden, it's put away, God can't see it, it's under the ground. God says, no, that blood stands as a witness against you. That blood tells me that you're guilty. And that there's no way you can pay for that, even if God would kill Cain. Now think about what we just learned in Exodus 22. Even if God would kill Cain, he can't make up for what he did. Because you can't just give life for life. You got to give 5 times over. You got to pay. What didn't you say? It wouldn't be fair if you just caught stealing my stuff and you hand me my stuff back and they let you go.
Well, was murder under a death penalty?
Yeah, murder is a death penalty offense. So just think, you can't just say, well, I'm sorry about that, and give you, even if Cain gives his own life, that won't pay for taking Abel's, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this blood is saying, you're guilty. This verse in Hebrews says Jesus' blood speaks better things than that of Abel. So Jesus' blood falls to the ground. He dies on the cross. He sheds his blood for you. What does his blood say to God? It no longer cries out, he's guilty. It cries out, he's innocent. I paid it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's clean. He's not guilty because I paid the price. So this blood speaks so much better, so much more, right? It satisfied the requirements of the law and then some. And then it says, here's one of the most serious warnings in all of the Bible is in Hebrews chapter 25. The reason I started out by saying that people always say the law is a man-made thing or the law is a religious thing. The law is not bad. We're bad. The law is perfect. It's the only way to satisfy a righteous God. But you can never keep the law. Only Jesus can. Only what Jesus did cries out. His blood cries out, you're free. Not you're condemned, but you're free. So verse 25 says a dire warning about ignoring the sacrifice of Christ. It says, see that you refuse not him that speaketh. He said, there's people that are walking around on the earth and they don't care that Jesus' blood has been shed for them. They don't care. They refuse it. They say, I don't want anything to do with Jesus. He said, be careful you don't do that. For if they escape not who refuseth him that spake on earth, Cain, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he hath promised, saying, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. He said there are people after the death of Jesus. You've heard the gospel. It's going to be a short lesson tonight. You've heard the gospel your whole life. You've become a Christian. You heard it. You accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
You got baptized. He's living inside of you. He's working inside of you right now. He said there's people that have heard the gospel and say, I don't want anything to do with Jesus. I don't want that sacrifice. I don't want that blood to speak for me. He said that you need to realize that you put yourself right back at Sinai. You put yourself at the foot of the mountain that cannot be touched. You cannot approach God. The blood cries out that you're guilty, right? Instead of Jesus' blood saying you're innocent, if you've refused him, his blood cries out that you're guilty. He said, you need to realize your God is a consuming fire. When I say your God, he's the only God, right? There's only one. And if you reject the blood of his son, God is a consuming fire. He's not just going to say, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it. Come on into heaven, you're a nice guy. He's a consuming fire. And I think we make a big mistake when we look at the law and say, oh, that's man-made. That's religion. We don't have to worry about that. We can just be buddies and pals with God the Father. The only way you have a relationship with God the Father is through the sacrifice of his son, because your God is a consuming fire, right? I can come boldly to the throne of God through Jesus. But if I refuse Jesus, I can't have anything to do with the Father. I'm in a hopeless situation. I'm Cain, standing there with blood on my hands, right? Not able to pay the penalty. And God is a consuming fire. Right? So, do you have anything to say about that?
Not really.
We don't like the law because the law makes us feel bad. Right? We don't like the law because when we stand before the law, we're guilty. The good news is, I'm not going to be judged by the law. I'm going to be judged on whether or not I accept the fulfillment of the law. The law is elegant. It's complete. If you read through the law like we're doing right now, you will find an answer to all of man's problems. If man could just live by what God put down in Exodus, this world would be perfect. The problem is you never measure up to the law. That's why he gave you sacrifices in the Old Testament to speak to you of better things. Jesus is the better things that he's speaking of. You will never keep the law, but the fulfillment of the law, Jesus Christ, he's separate. He's unique. He's the only way. He's the only one. Do you have anything else to say or add to that? The perfection of the law, perfection of Christ. Well, I told you this is going to be a short one, and we sure do miss Mom, but I'm glad Adam stepped in. I appreciate you being willing to talk to me about the Bible. And next week we'll be in Exodus chapter 23, hopefully, and we'll talk about more things there. But aren't you glad you're born in the age of grace? And aren't you glad we can look to the cross? And aren't you glad that his blood speaks better things, right? It cries out about me something that I'm not qualified to utter, and that is forgiven, right? It is forgiven, innocent in the sight of God because of what Jesus did. All right, tune in next time, guys. Make sure you get your Bibles read and be battle ready.